Well, today on Business Journey Unlocked, I'm joined by David Carr, founder and CEO of Steward Your Business, a business consulting and leadership advisory firm helping growth-minded companies bring clarity and confidence to their teams and strategic decisions. I'm very excited to dig into this conversation today. David, welcome to the show. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can explain yourself and what you do.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Kevin. A real pleasure to be with you. David Carr here. I started Steward Your Business in the fall of 2022 after being an environmental consultant for over 25 years, working as a biologist. And so I really saw, Kevin, a need in that particular arena. Architecture, engineering, environmental consulting, construction, where we have a lot of amazing, smart, technical subject matter experts that were challenged to step into leadership and to help grow and scale companies. So that's where Steward Your Business came around of like, how do we take care of our people? How do we grow leaders within those organizations, among other places? But that's where I spent my career learning from the trenches as a biologist, project manager, program manager, stepping up into leadership roles, working with companies, boards, C-suite, all of that stuff. Happy to break it down further with you there, Kevin. But that's really the genesis of Steward Your Business.
I love that. It's just tapping into your own personal experiences as well. And that's the thing that makes or breaks certain companies. You understood
Mhm.
the foundation, you understood what exactly needed to be done. It's just you knew yourself that you wanted to start this business. You
Yes.
wanted to take it to a level that no one is looking to go for, and that's where Steward Your Business comes in. I love that.
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah.
When you first launched the business, was there any challenges in terms of credibility, clarity, and just transitioning, your experiences into like the entrepreneurship roles?
That's a great question, Kevin. I would say before I launched the business, I would consider myself, I didn't know this language at first, but I would consider myself an intrapreneur. So intrapreneur meaning you're using somebody else's platform, looking for ways to grow and expand that. Not everybody thinks that way. It's not, men, there's an employee kind of default way I would say of thinking, and it's just very purely transactional. But an entrepreneur is very much um, like an entrepreneur in that you're looking at a business, you're looking at how do I grow, how to expand this, what does this look like, and you're looking at a lot of different aspects of the business, not just sales, not just production. You're looking at admin, and so over the course of my career, I had a lot of different opportunities in there, Kevin. So that was really beneficial for me stepping out and building my own company. I would say coming from doing something environmental consulting for over 20 plus years and then starting my own company, there was some branding, there was some you know clarity that needed to be worked out as to what am I specifically going to bring to the market, what are the challenges that are out there, and how do I address them. So I would say, you know the first part of my journey, and most businesses need to spend some time at getting clear about who do you want to serve, why do you want to serve them, what's their problem, what's that keeps them up at night, and really refine that. And it does evolve over time, Kevin. So I would say it doesn't set it and forget it. You might start with one idea and it evolves, and you're like, oh, I really think this is what's needed, and then you realize the market isn't responding to that, or what do I have to tweak in it. So I think that's part of the journey, and don't be afraid to lean into that. Is what I would say. Get coaching, get people outside of your understanding, and that's what I did. I hired coaches, I hired people. I started to put myself in containers to kind of hold a frame and to look at things and really challenge me in that. So I would say, Kevin, that is probably really key, because if you're not clear on that, you're going to have a real tough time growing and scaling your business.
You couldn't have said that any better. And it's
Mm.
just one thing that I see a lot of people do is just they want to be perfect. Okay. But the thing is, if you just have this analysis paralysis mindset, you're going to do nothing. You're not going to evolve the business. Naturally, when you start out, sure, you may have to pivot a couple times, but that's the beauty
Mhm.
of the business, the beauty and the downfall.
Yeah.
Sales, that's all the byproducts of the business. Like once you get a clear UVP, once you understand who you want to target, how you're going to target them, then that goes tenfolds. But I believe that one of the key issues that people do when they first start out is they try to recreate the wheel.
Hmm.
Okay? And the thing is, you can't recreate the wheel. There's a reason why certain businesses work out. Sure, you can have a different strategic outcome or process, but initially it dies down to the niche, who you're going to target, how you're going to target them, and just essentially what's going to happen. Like how are you going to provide value to them? That's the biggest quantitative
Yeah.
value that you have to have.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, Kevin, I think, and how, what's the way that, yeah, the value, um, and I would say you got to test this. I was just talking to a marketing person yesterday, Kevin, and we were saying like, she's like, I brought this new guy in. He has this idea of what to sell, and I was like, I don't know if it's a real problem. And I'm like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But you got to start testing. So I knew this, Kevin, before I even started my company. I lived it. I lived the challenge of being a technical person and going beyond a manager and leading. So I knew firsthand the challenges. Now, there's a one thing I would say also is who you're trying to serve. Are they problem aware? Are they truly aware of this problem, or do they feel like this is one that they want to fix? Because again, we can have great solutions, and if people don't feel like that's a problem or enough pain, they're not going to move on it. And I see again, some people come up with all sorts of different things, and they want to bring it to market, and then people don't value that, like you said earlier. Like, what's your unique value proposition or whatnot? What are you sharing, and does it have enough value to move the needle, or are you able to pick just the right pain point where we're like, oh, that hurts. Somebody says, does it hurt? Does it hurt? Nope, nope, nope. Ah, my goodness. Okay, well, I found it. Now we know we can start to work on that one, you know?
The
Um,
biggest thing is just I'm sorry, the biggest thing is just going on the fact that what's gonna happen with you and your business if you don't do anything at all.
yep.
That's poking there. That's the biggest poking.
Yes, absolutely. What's the cost, right, Kevin?
Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah. If we're not good at articulating that, there's a gentleman I was talking to earlier this year, where he does is return on investment calculators. That
Mm.
just like you put this plug in, and he develops it with companies of like, what is this? Um, and the better we can articulate that, because either they want to save money or they want to make more money, right? It's one of those two. And I also learned, Kevin, I was going to mention earlier that people buy what they want, not what they need.
Mhm.
People are looking. So if you're selling them what they need, as much as oh my goodness, yes, you absolutely need this, but they're not looking for that. They're buying what they want. And that's where you have to, in my experience, I've had to learn this the hard way. I'm like, I got to find out, what do they want? What are they looking for? And then if I can get them that, and then say, yeah, you bought this, but I know you really need this, and that's gonna make the difference. Because what happens is if we just get them only what they want, they don't get the result, they're like, "Well, this person was ineffective. They didn't get me." I'm like, "I know, because you said you wanted this, but really, this is what you needed." So I'm guilty of this too, because I buy these things and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I wanted this, but no, I really needed that." And this is where you get coaching. This is where you get people to help you see that, Kevin. And so I would say just be aware of that when you're selling. Are you clear? What do they need or what do they want?
Another key factor is people don't buy most people, I will say, don't buy logically, they buy with emotion, okay?
Mhm.
So going back to what you said is what they want and not what they need. It's in that line. It's just more so of understanding their perspective and kind of just reframing their perspective in a way where they tell you essentially what they're actually looking for. And when they
Mhm.
actually tell you that aspect, okay, great. Like you didn't say that before, but you're saying it now. Why are you saying it now? And you just got to dig deeper, deeper, deeper to find out
Yes.
the core reasons as to why they want this when they actually need this. Okay,
Yes.
sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow for certain people, but the thing is this: you're in this business not to make people happy. You're in this business to obviously make people happy, but in a sense where you want
Mhm.
to be clear, confident, open, and transparent to what you're offering. So let's say you're down the line with the business that you're partner with. There's no confusion. It's clear and honest, open, transparent, and this is how you grow. Okay, again, some people may not want to hear it, but it's a tough truth to swallow if they want the business to actually grow and be prosperous. That's a key
Mhm.
difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah, definitely.
So with everything going on in your market, there's so many different other types of consulting agencies. How
Mhm.
do you qualify your unique value proposition, and what specific advantages does your business have over other people in the same boat as you?
That's a great question too, Kevin. I mean, this is always like when we're buying from people, we wanna know, like, what distinguishes you from the next guy? Um, For me, I purposely have chosen to stay, not that I can't be outside of the AEC industry, but because I lived it, I've been there, I
Yeah.
understand it. I understand, especially to go from literally getting out of college, getting my first degree, being a biologist, and working my way up. And I also stay really engaged with the industry. So I'm a member of the Wildlife Society. I went last month. We're recording this in December. We did this last November. I went to the Society for American Military Engineers, a federal small business conference, invited as a speaker. So I know that my message is resonating. And if I'm being invited as a speaker, as you know too, I run a different podcast called the Business Roundtable podcast, where I have other folks come on there. So that helps me, Kevin, through networking and meeting with folks. Does this message resonating? And when people go, "Aha, yes, I get it," um, that helps me. Number one, am I getting number one the want, and hopefully tapping into the need? But like, okay, yep, and coming from the experience of living this, Kevin, is really important too. So I didn't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I think I should just do some leadership and development coaching." No, it really started with me years ago, my own journey of like, oh, what is a leader? What's a manager? Like, I had to go through this journey myself, Kevin, and put words to it. And so, and then surrounding myself, quite honestly, with other coaches, other leaders, and I'm putting myself in a, I don't know, so crucible, if you will, so that I'm not staying siloed. I'm not staying in my own little world. You need to get out there. You need to test the message, and really, to me, that's made the difference. When I meet with people and then people want to come talk to me, they want to hear what's going on. If you're not having people ask, knock and ask at your door or checking with you, then that probably means your messaging isn't quite right. You're not reaching folks. And so those are just some of the things. Happy to dive in more, but that's just some of the things where I've helped distinguish myself in the marketplace, steward your business. But it definitely takes effort, and it's not a one and done. You can't set it and forget it, Kevin. It
Not
continues
at
to
all.
evolve.
Not at all, and it just goes from what you said earlier, trial by error, okay? You have to
Mhm.
try something for a certain period of time to see if it sticks. If not,
Yeah.
then you can just cross it off your list, but at least you know that you tried it, okay?
Hmm.
There's a lot of people nowadays where it's hard for them to be in an uncomfortable state, but the only way to grow is to be in that uncomfortable state.
Yeah.
Go with people who are like-minded as well, as you said. You got coaches, you got mentors, you develop the podcasts to increase your
Hmm.
network, which is exactly what I'm doing as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That's why I wanted to come on your podcast, Kevin, because I'm like, Kevin's trying to do this. Let's support each other in getting our messaging out there. And I so appreciate you, Kevin, like saying this. I'm 52 years old. You're a little bit younger than me, but you're like, hey, David, I'm going to get out there and do this. And I think a lot, like to your point earlier on the podcast, you're like, some people were not, they're sitting back waiting. Is somebody else going to do this? Like, I'm going to get this going. And I kudos to you, Kevin, for kicking this off and putting this out there in the world.
Thank you, thank you, and it just
Yeah.
goes from the fact that no one's gonna give you handouts in life. You
Mm.
gotta do what you have to do in order to make yourself, your life, your family just have a good life, a good prosperous
Mhm.
life, and it's just going from my perspective as well. I started my business in October, and my thought was, what's the best way to get in touch with people, like-minded people like myself, who are CEOs and
Mhm.
founders? That's when I decided to start this podcast. Okay,
Yeah.
and it grew to a point where I'm actually taken back at the fact of how many people actually came on that actually wanted to talk to me. And at first, I was going to do more in the security niche, given my
Mhm.
background in criminal justice and have a couple of security licenses. But everybody, David, that was interested in coming onto the podcast were completely outside of that scope. I'm talking about
Mm.
finance, construction,
Mhm.
healthcare, social work. I mean, just so many different opportunities to discuss with so many different founders and so many different niches. I mean, that's the beauty of this, right?
Yeah.
It's you can get connected with anybody. And it's just even easier nowadays when we're on a computer instead of being face to
Mhm.
face. Because I mean, we're on opposite sides of the country right now.
Yeah.
But we're talking right now, technically, you can say we're face to face in a certain
Yeah.
sense. But that's the beauty with technology. Technology has its pros and cons, but what we're talking about right now is more of a pro than a con.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and you know, I love. I was talking to somebody else earlier today. I was talking to a fractional HR person. We were talking about like, technology is just like you said. It's a tool that can be used well. We were talking about AI because AI is all the rage. It's been that way for a little while now. But it's a tool. It doesn't. It's not an end all be all. And I
Right.
think it's part of the arsenal of what you're doing. And so podcasting is one of those things. And I think it's a great tool. I really enjoyed doing mine now over 2 years. Um, and I've listened to them too. And so just think what does it look like for you as a business owner? I think that you're asking me earlier, Kevin. It doesn't have to be a big podcast. There's so many different ways you can to reach people. But again, to your point, Kevin, where are the people you're trying to serve? If they're on a podcast, great. Or if they're on TikTok or whatever the platform is, it is Blue Sky, whatever you name it, right? Whatever X or Facebook or whatever. Where are your people? Where are the people that you want to serve? Because that's what you need to do is get out of your own way. Go to where they're at. They're not here. This is what I do find is that you know yes, they will find you to a certain degree, but people have got a lot of things going on. So you've got to go where you're at. So for example,
Right.
Kevin, you reached out to me, you found where I was, and you invited me on your podcast. You're like, hey, I want to see if this might be a good fit for you, David. So you knew how to, find people. And then of course people will come to you too. But I think that's one of your talents is that, hey, where are these folks where are the right people I want to? I started this up and it just snowballed from there.
Exactly, and the worst that people can say is no, and then you just go on
Yes.
to the next person.
Hmm.
There's so much business out in the country that sure, you're gonna get some no's, but maybe some no's at that time will turn into a yes in the future,
Yep.
or it's just, going on to somebody else, okay?
Hmm.
And I'm not trying to be negative in that perspective, but it's
Hmm.
just from the fact that there's so many other people who are willing to actually communicate and talk about their business,
Yeah.
okay? Just like-minded individuals like you and I. And that
Hmm.
sets, certain people apart. It's just that people I don't wanna say people aren't aware of it, but some people just don't wanna some people more closed-minded. Some people just don't have the mentality to, talk on a recorded line to just discuss their business. And ultimately, it
Hmm.
goes down to personality too, or what exactly their
Yep.
business entails. But there's so many factors into that. Now, I'm going to touch base on what you were mentioning earlier regarding AI. So the way
Mhm.
that I view AI is I like to see it more as complementing the business.
Yep.
Sure, naturally, what's going to happen in the next couple of years, there might be some jobs that would leave or dwindle out because of artificial intelligence, but there also will be other jobs that would flourish in relation to artificial intelligence. And give an example is I know I can't think of certain colleges off the top of my head, but I know there's programs in colleges now that dive into artificial intelligence
Mhm.
and how people can use that in terms of business sense. Because if you're using it for a business perspective, that's beneficial. There's so many different ways, so many outcomes that you can use artificial intelligence for your business. But then it goes from the fact is how much is too much? You don't want
Mhm.
to over rely on it, you don't wanna depend on it because there's a ton of people on a personal level, on a consumer mindset, who are so fixated on using artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, deep
Mhm.
AI, Perplexity, and they just use it for simple mundane questions or simple mundane tasks
Mhm.
when it revolves very little brain power, okay?
Yeah.
There's a point where you're using it to benefit yourself, and then there's a point where you're using it for just every single question. Just give you an example off the top of my head. I remember reading a story where this couple, I forget where they were going, but they were going to another country, and instead of actually doing their due diligence, doing their research, what they did was they just plugged it through ChatGPT. Oh, what do I need to go to this country? And it lists a couple things. When they got there, they couldn't enter the country because they didn't have the right documentation. And what happened? They over relied and depended too much on artificial intelligence. The way
Yep.
I like to say it is you got to trust but verify, as what
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan once said. You gotta
Yeah.
trust but
Agreed.
verify, and again, it complements the business, but you shouldn't overly depend on it. It helps, but it's not going to entirely replace your team. It's not going to replace your business because if you think about it, how did artificial intelligence get the information that they have?
Yep.
Through humans,
Yep.
through us. So
Yeah.
even though it's thinking in its own atmosphere, own environment, it's still getting information that we manually had to input for it to think the way it thinks.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. You know, as you were telling that story, Kevin, another one came to mind years ago here in Southern California. It wasn't even before AI. It was just using GPS. And I'm based here in Southern California, and there's lots of traffic between here and Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And there was a crash, and everyone's like, "Oh!" And then GPS said, "Well, you could take this dirt road." And all these cars took this dirt road, which they should never have taken, and they all got stuck, and it was a total mess. But because the GPS said I could go this road was there, whatever. I'm like, yes, you know, to your point, we need to be critical thinkers and look at all these things, and nothing. It's all like you said, human created ultimately, and so you know we have to. I like what you said, trust but verify. That's a great way of putting at it, or you know, we have to co-think with it, if you will. That was another I was talking to another colleague, Phil Topham about that, and he was like, kind of I heard him say that. I'm like, "Oh, that's right." It's not just let it go up by itself. We're gonna rein it in together, and I think that's a much better way to approach AI or any technology, to be honestly.
I love how you tapped in onto the GPS because there's so many people in my generation who don't even know how to get to another destination without using GPS. A lot of people my age don't know how to read a map, how to read a compass, how to read the sun. Just to give you an example from somebody else that I brought onto the podcast, Cody Mills, he told me his niece didn't know how to get to a Walmart in their town, and it's one of like 3 or 4 biggest stores in there, and, like, how do you not know how to get to Walmart? It's, like, maybe, let's say, for example, 10 blocks away, okay? She's like, "Oh, I don't know, I just plug it into GPS." But going back to what I mentioned, that people just over-rely on technology.
Yeah.
It takes away the critical thinking, it takes away the critical awareness,
Yeah,
and
and
that's
we need more critical thinking than ever,
Mhm,
Kevin, in
mhm,
our world. We need people like, developing that mental muscle, if you will, and
mhm.
having conversations like this are part of that. And hopefully as your listeners, they're seeing that you're asking the critical questions and helping them think a little differently than they would normally.
I feel that with everything going on, and this is just from a personal note, with
Mhm.
everything revolved around AI and how people are relying on it too much to a certain degree, I personally feel there's going to be a lot of dementia, Alzheimer's in the near future, especially with my
Mm,
generation, because they're not using a lot of their brain power. They're
yeah.
not using it in a way where they're doing something different every day. I mean, the biggest thing that I can think of is learning an instrument, learning a language. Okay, that taps into a whole different facades, whole different environment in your brain. And I personally, I'm learning Italian, and I'm just because I'm part Italian and I want to learn the language and eventually visit the country. But it's from the fact is I'm just constantly challenging myself in a
Yeah.
way where I'm not being comfortable. As we mentioned before, the only way to grow, either in a personal or business sense, is through being uncomfortable. That's the only way to
Yeah.
grow at all in life. You don't want to be too comfortable. And I have friends who are too comfortable to the point where they haven't had jobs in years.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
24 to give you reference, and I have friends who just I try to get them jobs. I try to be like, "Hey, here's I can get you in at this place. There's a job opening here." Like I try, but the thing is the reference I like to say is you can lead the horse to water, but you can't let the horse drink it. That's up to the horse to drink the water. Okay? And it's just so true on so
Yep.
many levels because people don't want to do until they actually are in a point where they feel that pain, as you mentioned earlier. Why not
Well, and yeah.
No, go ahead.
You're you're saying that you're to that point, the pain point, like you said, Kevin, and as you just said to me, like, couple of things came to mind real quick, is that it's not just, in business, but it's also I would say your physical body too, like, if you go to the gym or do any workout, that's all like literally tearing muscle, right? You're building muscle. You're stressing your out. They even say going to failure, meaning you can't lift up anymore. But that's how you get stronger. And then one thing I was reminded to just recently, because I'm going to work better on the gym. But one of the things is if you do the same routine all the time, if you don't vary your routine, that's also a recipe to get hurt. You have to mix up the things you're doing. So you got to be like, because we, like you said, Kevin, I think we get into habits and routines because our brains are kind of lazy in that way. We don't want to have to think about it. So like, we just kind of go into this automation mode, and that doesn't help us, like to your point, grow. And I think put yourself in that situation, put yourself, in a space, like I said earlier, if you're a business owner, you're thinking about being a business owner, put yourself in a space put some pressure on you in a good way. I think we need more of that.
Yeah, and just going on to the gym sense as well. Your body gets adapted and adjusted to the workout. So if you don't
Mhm.
change it up, what's going to happen? You're not going to get as much gain per se, and it
Yep.
just limits everything else. And it's just going from the fact is that naturally the brain doesn't like change. Okay, like that's completely
Yep.
understandable in a sense of survival state, but we're not given the way society is nowadays. You can go out and you can drive. And I like to say this analogy, or not analogy, statistic. You're more likely to die from going to your 9 to 5 job as opposed to skydiving, right? Okay? It's just we're put in a risk every single day, but because we do it every single day, we don't look at it as a risk. We look at it as just another day, a normal day. Oh, I'm driving to work, but you don't know what could happen during going from A to B. For
Uh-huh.
example, there was a story that I read about 2 weeks ago, and where I'm located, there was an individual who was driving to work just like another normal day, and he got into a really bad car crash and he lost his life. Sad as to say, but he didn't know that was going to be his time. It's just you got to take every day and you got to do something. I would say different in a sense, just something like a little different. It doesn't have to be a huge difference, just like small steps to make yourself get better in life. The way that we would be more prosperous is gaining a skill in life. And if people don't have at least 1 or 2 skills under the belt, I'm not talking about being a jack of all trades,
Uh-huh.
okay? That's good in certain aspects, but if you're looking to really dial in to either getting growth in a professional level, a personal level, you have to acquire certain skill sets in order to grow and achieve what you want to achieve. Because as we mentioned earlier, nobody gets handouts. Nothing in life will be able to allow you to grow if you're not actually committed and doing it yourself. And that's the
Uh-huh.
biggest differentials. But
Yeah.
so going on your admin work, you briefly mentioned that. Just not even in admin work, just like in general, like if you could in your business, if you could remove one operational bottleneck or a time shrink in your business to kind of grow and expand, what exactly would that be in your business to help it grow?
Oh, great question. I think business owners, at least for me, I'll just say, tend to like to be in one area or the other when I say either sales or production. You got people that really like to do sales and they like that front end, or there are the people that are like the back end of like helping make things happen,
Mhm.
so to speak. I'm the person that typically is more on the back end. I just love production. I love helping work. So what that meant is, you know, we tend to then de-emphasize one area and we need all of them. Okay. You need both. It's like you can have great sales and then not have the support and getting all the work done. They're not going to have a lot of pre-sales, or vice versa. If you're doing great work, but then you're not building, continuing bringing people in, that's a problem too. So for me personally, I just started recognizing that the sales component was not my strength, and having I have a marketing admin assistant that helps me now and going through and doing some of the follow up and getting some of the cleanup on that. And to me that's helping because also I'm not I'm much more of a, I'd say, a future oriented person. So I use a framework called Five Voices, which by the way, Kevin, I'm happy to share that we do a free assessment as part of my company. But part of that assessment is understanding how do you orient yourself are you more future oriented in the way you process things or more present oriented? And so I'm much more future oriented, thinking about things in the future, how to get things like what this would look like. But I neglect some of the things in the day to day. So that's where it's really good to bring somebody from the admin time that you're talking about, Kevin, is like, where is that in your business? Is it one of the first things I did was I brought in a bookkeeper because I knew I was not gonna be, like, wanting to look at the minutia of the numbers, meaning, like, all these aligning all these things, transactions, just not my strength. I brought in her, she got my QuickBooks set up, a lot of the things all linked in. So, understand where your greatest strengths are and lean into them, and whether or not bring in other people to help you. That's been a game changer for me. And the saying is, I should have hired someone or brought somebody in sooner is absolutely true. We often like just want to keep powering through and doing it ourselves, but be real about the value of your time and where you're going to have the greatest influence and impact. For me, I know for sure it's on the back end when I'm working with folks, or on also having the conversations like we're doing here today, Kevin, but then having other people do some of the, I call it minutia, but quite honestly, it's very necessary for me to have a successful business. So that's just some of the things I looked at, that's been a game changer.
I see your point of view, and it just goes from the fact that if you're just starting out, you can't really delegate. You
Right.
have to go into the weeds to understand exactly where your strengths are, as you mentioned, what can be
Hmm.
delegated. Because essentially, people want to buy back their time. That's
Hmm.
natural. But you have to fully understand the ins and outs, the front end, the back end, to actually be aware, as we mentioned earlier, of what exactly needs to be processed. And I think that's
Hmm.
excellent because when you get to a certain point where you actually are able to delegate certain tasks, go for it. Go
Hmm.
for it so you can focus on what matters most, growth
Absolutely.
and sales. Because you're not going to grow without clientele. You're not going to grow without them purchasing products and services that you offer. And the only way to do that is to either one, you can do it yourself, but it might be a little slower. Sure, you might be more fulfilled and you might be saving money, but at the same time, you're losing that time. We all have
Yeah.
the same 24 hours in a day. It's from the fact that how are you actually promoting real growth and real change in the business to make it go from starting out in 2020 and by, I'm sorry, 2022, and by 2032, you could be hitting places in the East Coast. Okay. But you won't be able to do that without actually having that delegation to actually focus on what matters most in that growth. Okay, and this is going to touch more on my next question, but based on everything that you're seeing right now in your niche, is there certain any major shifts that you see in terms of client expectations, market dynamics that are forcing you to adapt either your service delivery or technology stack right now?
Oh boy, that you got a lot to unpack there, Kevin. I will just say, um, well, first I want to just your delegation so important, and if Kevin, I'll also offer up to you and anybody else on the that wants to. I have a delegation matrix that I use with my clients and myself, breaking down what needs to be delegated by who, by when. So if anybody wants that, I'll share it with you, and you're welcome to share it with your audience. To me, the um there's a couple different things at play. Like I mentioned, I spoke last month at the Society for American Military Engineers, Federal Small Business Conference. Well, we had one of the longest government shutdowns we've ever had in the history of the United States. That obviously impacts things. It gives people they're unsettled with what's going on at the federal government level. Now, what and we have uncertainty across the world, and that's never going to change. We're always going to have uncertainty. I had a great conversation with a gentleman named Mark Daniels on my podcast, and he's a calls himself the $1 billion coach. And one of the things he talked about was he doesn't look necessarily for emphasize threats because there's always going to be threats. There's always going to be things that are going to challenge us. But what are the trends? What are the things that we're looking at? So to your point, Kevin, what are we seeing going forward? Right now, I think there's still, it's been disrupted since, with AI, and it continues to be disruptive. But what happens is I think some people are feeling like they're just pausing, like, well, will this just go over? Will this just pass? And I'm like, no, we're in a world that's I'm old enough to remember, Kevin, and you weren't around when then, but where there was the dot-com boom of, the late '90s and the early 2000s, where like Who do we need to go a website? Is that even important? Why have a website? There's a lot of that question back then. And now it's like, that's a no-brainer, right? So it's like, no, you need to adjust, you need to plan and keep moving forward. It's just what is your strategy? How what I found, Kevin, is people are being they're just kind of hunkering down to a certain degree. And I've noticed this is the last probably half of this year. I was recording this at the end of 2026. And I'm like, you can't stay stagnant. You're either growing or you're breaking down. There's no static. And so now, the challenge that I face as a business owner and speaking to those folks is, again, what we talked earlier about what's the pain and what's it's costing them to stay where they're at. And can I get to the point enough to where they're like, no, I got to move, right? And that's where all of us need to be looking and seeing, like, am I doing it in a way that is in their best interest? I'm not trying to manipulate anybody. That's not a long-term success. But I'm trying to say, like, hey, if you don't do these things, you're going to be hurting from now. And I'll give you a quick example of this, Kevin. I worked with a company, or I was large engineering planning company, and they're about, I don't know, say like 6,000 employees. Well, one year they decided, hey, you know what? We're not going to do any recruiting. We're going to pause on that. We're not going to be proactive about it, right? Well, they didn't see anything from that in the first month or the second month, but about a year later, they're like, we got these projects and we don't have enough people to do all of them, because they weren't actively recruiting. They just thought, we'll just keep everything the same. And it's like, well, that's a recipe for disaster. It's like, so when I'm talking about steward your business and your team, I'm like, if you've got a person on your team and you're not developing them today, and you just think, well, they'll just be the exact same person next year, they may not be with your company next year, or you're certainly not going to be as competitive in the marketplace if you don't do this work. So that's the challenge I see right now, Kevin, is folks kind of holding back and they're like, "Oh, I don't know if I should do anything." I'm like, doing something is just setting yourself up for failure in the long term, or you're not going to be as successful.
You couldn't have said that any better, David. And it just goes from the fact that people are afraid of shifting, evolving their business. Going back to AI, it's just AI is constantly evolving every single day. Going on a
Mhm.
business sense, it could help out in businesses in so many different aspects, as I mentioned, right? And there will be businesses that won't adopt it, and there will be businesses that will adopt it. And who's going to be left behind? The people that aren't adopting it in certain aspects. If you're looking at the trade, for example, that's a whole different ballpark. Sure, with automation, it could help in a sense. There's some machinery out there that helps with actually being out on the construction field, but AI, artificial intelligence, won't replace those jobs. They can help with, like, maybe, for example, the blueprints, the execution, but actually doing it, that's a whole different situation. And
Mhm.
it goes from the fact, touching on what you said earlier, it's just people are afraid. They want to be comfortable. They don't want to change, but the only way to change is to look at it from different perspective, which is
Yep.
why you're in there to try to help their business. And
Absolutely.
that's the most beautiful thing. So looking on your business, right? Going into 2026, going 12 months from now, what's something in terms of your systems, your execution that you're looking to build and expand on to promote growth in either expanding your business, expanding the internal systems? What's the game plan for that going into 2026?
That's great. Thanks, Kevin, for asking. I started the company, like I said, in the fall of 2022, working with small business owners and their teams. I continue to do that. It's been great. I've been working with some just fantastic firms, and will continue to do that as I go into 2026. However, this year I really was working through basically a pilot coaching program for individuals to come in, and that's where I'm actually excited to go into 2026, is to offer that for individuals if they don't have it at their workplace, or the workplace is whatever they're providing as far as leadership and development as a professional is not there, or they want a space in a community to connect with others. That's what I'm creating, and have created, Kevin, and will continue to expand into next year. I find with AI, we're really looking for authentic communication with other human beings, like you and I are doing here. And we want to have it, we just have it's in our DNA. And so, but we haven't found it very successfully. And so we have these kind of, social media is it tries to hit the mark, and can I do it some of the times? Sure. But my goal is to create a curated community of individuals that can come in, have a space where they can learn, develop themselves, advance themselves, not just in their business, but it'll obviously spill over to their relationships, how they show up in life overall, living more purposely fulfilled lives. And then I've got, like, just like you have had great guests and conversations. And so bringing other people into that ecosystem and community to share and to provide resources is my goal. Because at the end of the day, I want to leave people better off than I found them and encourage them along the way. So there's going to be a platform I call it Steward Yourself, how we can help people the SYB way. So anybody wants to know more about that, I'm happy to share that with them, Kevin. But that's my goal as I go into 2026.
That's beautiful. I absolutely love
Hmm.
that for you, David. It just shows at the end of the day, people connect with people.
Hmm.
And it just goes to
Yeah,
show that you're not you're in this to help people out.
absolutely.
Byproduct is obviously the monetary value, but when you can actually see somebody go from just starting out to actually being prosperous and succeeding 6, 12 months down the line, it won't happen
Hmm.
overnight. Nothing
Right.
happens overnight. You have to put in the time, you gotta put in the effort to actually be able to build and grow and expand something into fruition to where not only you're proud of it, but they're proud of it as well. And going onto this platform, it's excellent. I love that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Before of course, before we wrap up here, just one last question. For you, either on a professional or personal level, what is one critical habit or belief that you carry day to day that helped you succeed in your 25 years in your space and then going into the entrepreneurship world?
Oh man. Well, I'm sure there's different things that come to mind for me. To me, faith is a big one in that there's something bigger than myself. I'm a come from a person of a Christian background, but you don't have to have that per se. But for me, there's a difference between believing and faith, and there's a gap there. So, and there's a great book I just read recently, 10x is easier than 2x. If there's a gap and there's a gain, okay? And so what I would say is for my innate faith means there's something I'm gaining that's much better than I'm losing. There's a gap there. And so I think any entrepreneur, any business owner, if you get into business, you have to be looking at the gain. You have to be looking at what's the possibility. Can I get there? Not overnight, but what could that be? What's that compelling vision, Kevin? And whatever that is for you, for me, it's to receive love and to share love with the world. And I happen to do it through Steward Your Business. How do we help and empower people through leading themselves, developing themselves? That's just the way I found a way into the world. But I saw a greater purpose. That keeps me going because, quite honestly, there's days where no, it's not going to plan. It didn't work out. I didn't, and could I look at that and the gap of where I'm not versus where do I want to go? And so that's really a big thing for me of like, yep, I'm here and I don't have a basis of understanding, but that's where I want to go. That's the mountain I want to take. That's where I want to head. And whether I can get there or not, I don't know, but I know that's the direction that's going to make the best impact and influence in the world. And that's what I'm committed to.
The first thing that came to mind after that is it's not how the world treats you, it's how you treat the world. The world can
Mm,
spit you out left and right, curb stomp you endlessly, but it's from the fact is how are you gonna get up and keep going and doing what exactly it is you need to grow and expand? And once people
absolutely.
understand that, once people have that discipline, motivation goes a long way, but motivation only gets you so far. If you actually have that discipline, that sets you up apart from a whole bunch of people that just rely too much on motivation and not much on discipline.
Yeah.
For people that are either listening or watching this, David, what's the best place for them to reach you at?
Well, happy to connect on LinkedIn, my stewardyourbusiness.com. We're happy to have you there. If you look up Business Roundtable or David Carr on any of the podcast platforms, you'll find me on all the good platforms there. I love connecting with folks. I love hearing from folks. Any of the resources I mentioned here today, Kevin, I'm happy to share with you show links, all that good stuff, or they can just reach out to me. I'm all about providing value before and relationship before opportunity. So that's why I'm here too, Kevin, and to support you. And I appreciate you having me on the podcast. It's a real pleasure.
My pleasure, David. Thank you. I really do appreciate your time and taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.